Okay, we're speaking about the state of affairs in the world at the time of Rambam Avinu. I mean, here we have the Great Flood. Due to mankind's misbehavior, God brings existence to an end. And finally, after a year being in the ark, who emerges? Noah and his family. He has 3 sons, their wives, his wife, to begin a new existence. All the species that initially were created, representation of those species, 2 of the non-kosher, male, female, 7 of the kosher, domesticated, undomesticated, reptiles, birds, insects. Every living species was preserved for a year. They come out, beginning of a new existence. There was no question initially that because of who their father was, as the Torah identifies him as tzaddik, Tomin, he was a devoutly righteous, he was complete in his quality of person. So evidently, initially, God was in the forefront of their minds. They come out to existence, not a trace of the original humanity. A new world, pristine, pure. What happens in a short period of time? They go back to their old ways. People have short memories. And what did they do? Rebelling against God. Last week we read about the Tower of Babel. They wanted to build a tower to go against God, whatever that means. Back to idolatry. Avram was born into a pagan world. Avram is a descendant of Shem. And although Shem was alive, Terach, who was a grandson of Shem, was a fervent, devout pagan. And when his eldest son, Avram, was asked to mind the store, and his father was an idol manufacturer, Avram destroyed all the idols. Comes back, Terach, he realizes his whole inventory of idols were destroyed, and he understood this was Avram. Avram had destroyed them. He goes and informs on Avram to the king, who was the forefront of idolatry in the world, Nimrod. And Nimrod says to Avram, I'll give you a last chance. Either you bow to the idol, or I'll put you into the kiln, and you will die through fire. Avram said, I will die. I will not bow to something which is falsehood. I believe there's one almighty, there's a monotheistic being that controls and wills this existence. I prefer to die for truth than live a falsehood. And he would not bow. Put into the kiln, and he comes out alive. His clothing weren't even singed. To that degree. Now, Nimrod, who originally had given the order to put him into the kiln for not bowing, what should he be done when he saw Avram come out of the kiln? I'll give you an example. Not that I was ever in the casino. I even saw a slot machine. I saw a slot machine once when I was years ago. I was in the Smithsonian. They had a replica of a slot machine, going back to the early part of the 20th century. I say to a person, you put a coin there, you pull the lever, I guarantee you $1 million comes out. Person, house, try it. Sure enough, $1 million worth of coins come out of the slot machine. He says, it's a fluke. Try it again. Again, it comes out. After a while, the person realizes that evidently I have something on the ball here. When I'm telling you, You want the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? Just keep pulling that slot machine. It just keeps churning out the coins. It's unheard of, a person going into a kiln, and it was a kiln meaning it was beyond an oven, and he comes out unscathed, unsinged. Now, let's fast forward to Elio on Mount Carmel. Achov, who was a king, the Jewish king, he was a fervent worshiper of the Baal, which was an idol, was a deity. And Elijah the prophet, was a fugitive. He hunted him, couldn't find him. Over 20 years, finally meets Elio after 22 years in the desert. And there's been a drought as a result of what's going on. Because Elio said there was no water. They were already eating rodents. They were eating the donkeys. That's how long the drought continued. And he meets Elio and he says to Elio, you are the destroyer of the Jewish people. You hear this? The man who killed all the rabbis, killed all the prophets, anyone he could lay his hand on, he accuses Elio to be the gangster. You gangster, you subhuman being. That's how he refers to Elijah the prophet. Elijah says, you know something? You believe in what you believe in, I believe what I believe in. Why don't we have a showdown? Showdown at high noon. Mount Carmel, we'll get the whole Jewish people onto the top of Mount Carmel. You get your prophets of the Baal, these idolatrous prophets, and I'll be there. You bring your sacrifice to your Baal, and I'll bring my sacrifice to God. And let the people make a decision what is true and what is false. Okay? So they bring wagon loads of these Hare Krishna characters, to the top of Mount Carmel. All the Jewish people are there to witness this. And Elio is there, Elijah the prophet, and they build an altar, and they have their pails of water there, and they have their animal. They sacrifice it, they slaughter it, and put it on the altar. And then they start chanting and praying and screaming to their deity that a fire should come down from heaven and consume the sacrifice, similar to Cain and Abel. When Abel brought his sacrifice, a fire came down and consumed it, which was an indication that he was the favorite of God. This is before Cain killed him. So similar, through their idolatrous rituals, they expected the fire to come down, that the deity would send the fire down to consume the sacrifice, the animal. So they start praying to their deity. They start screaming. And they start dancing and chanting. Nothing's happening. So Elio says to them, why are you screaming? Is your deity hard of hearing? Is that why you have to scream? This is before they had hearing aids, so they didn't have all these other, this type of thing, they didn't have the, you couldn't get a guarantee and insurance on it, a warranty. So he says, what's going on? Then they start dancing and screaming. They start lacerating their bodies to show to what degree they're dedicated to their deity. Nothing happens. Okay? So the people see clearly, nothing happened. Now it's Elio's turn. He builds an altar, brick, stone by stone. He has a few pails of water. He takes the animal, slaughters it, puts it on the altar. He raises his eyes to heaven and he says 3 words. Aneni Hashem Aneni. Answer me, God, answer me. Those 3 words. Answer me, God, answer me. In Hebrew, it's 3 words. Aneni Hashem Aneni. The moment he finishes saying the second Aneni, a ball of fire comes out of heaven, consumes the animal, consumes the stones of the altar, consumes the pails of water, everything disappears. Which clearly indicated God embraced the sacrifice and everything which is associated with Elio. When the Jews saw this, every Jew, you know what he did? He prostrated himself on the mountain and declared, Hashem hu Elokim. God is the Almighty. He won the day. Okay, that's the story. So what was the result of the fire coming from heaven? It was confirmation. Theirs, it didn't work. His did work. Nimrod says to Avram, if you don't bow, you're going to the kiln. Nobody comes out of a kiln alive. Avram comes out of a kiln alive. What should have Nimrod done at that moment? He should have prostrated himself and say, Hashem Elokim, God is the Almighty. But what does he say? Avram had a brother who's the father of Lot. He says, Mr. Haran, what are you going to do? Are you going to bow or are you going into the kiln? So before Avram went into the kiln, he said to himself, if Avram comes out of alive, I'm with Avram. He says to Haran, so what are you going to do? He says, I will not bow. He says, if you're not bowing, you're going to the kiln. He says, I'll go into the kiln. He goes into the kiln and he dies. Doesn't come out alive. But the question is, if Avram came out alive, how is this not an eye-opener to Nimrod that God is in control? But evidently he wasn't fazed by it. Proof of the pudding wasn't fazed, that he says to Haran, Avram's brother, Haran, are you going in or are you bowing? He says, I'm going in. Seemingly he wasn't impressed. How can he not be impressed? How do we understand it? Now, Eliyahu in Hara Carmel repeated the same word twice. He said, Aneni Hashem Aneni. Answer me, God, answer me. Why do you have to repeat the word answer me? He should say, God, answer me. That's it. What do you have to say? Answer me twice. Aneni Hashem Aneni. So the Gemara explains. The first Aneni was, he's saying to God, allow a ball of fire to come down from heaven to consume the sacrifice and everything that's there. What's the second Aneni? The second Aneni is the people who witness this, they shouldn't attribute it to witchcraft, to sorcery. They should see it in its true light, that it's you, it's not sorcery. Because if they see it as sorcery, it means nothing. They'll attribute Eliyahu as a sorcerer. So let them see it correctly, and therefore they will become subservient to you. And that's what happened. God answered on both fronts. The ball of fire came down, and he did not allow that consideration to enter their minds that maybe it's sorcery. And therefore, as a result of that, they prostrate themselves with the declaration, Hashem Elokim. God is the Almighty. So what do we seek? If not for the second Aneni, although you saw something which is once in a lifetime, if you live in an era of sorcery, you'd say that's sorcery. That's what you would say. Eliyahu had to pray that there should be special intervention, that should be kept out of the equation. They should see it for its in its real light. Nimrod was a well-weathered pagan. He's not changing his position of paganism unless he's convinced beyond any doubt that this is nothing but the real thing. Avram comes out. So he realizes he can't do anything to Avram. He says to Haran, Mr. Haran, what are you doing? Are you bowing or are you going to the kiln? He says, I'm going to the kiln. Goes in, he perishes. But how's he processing this event? Nimrod says, this confirms what I said. That Avram coming out is a fluke. You want to attribute to sorcery, you can attribute to anything you want. But if in fact, When you give your life to God, God saves your life, protects you. Why did Haran perish in the fire? So you see clearly, even if you don't bow and you give your life for whatever this is called, you don't live. So it proves nothing. It proves nothing. I'm not impressed. That's where Nimrod is coming from. And the whole generation, it did not in any way affect or change the position of any of the pagans. Avram was the lowly monotheist. Now, Nimrod could believe what he believes. But Avram, who was the beneficiary of this miracle, he knew it was the real thing. He knew God took him out of the fire. It wasn't due to any, what we call hocus pocus. It was the real thing. Now, we find Avram knowing who he is, knowing who his backer is. He has a one-of-a-kind of backer, Avram. His backer is God. His backer is the Creator. There's nothing beyond the Creator's ability. Avram is willing to take on the world single-handedly. Avram is identified as Ivri. The word Ivri, Hebrew, but the word Ivri means he's from the other side. So the Midrash tells us, Hu me'ever echad v'kol olam me'ever hasheni. Avram's on one side of the world, and the rest of the world's on the other side. He's taking on the world single-handedly. Who ever heard of such a thing? Take on the world single-handedly. One individual, the four mightiest kings, he goes to battle with them. When his nephew's taken captive, how did they see it, and how did he see it? They saw it. He's a fanatical zealot. He believes he can survive anything, but the man is demented. There's something wrong with him. You just have to activate him, and he goes straight into the lion's mouth. When he goes to the lion's mouth, we're going to shut it, and he's going to get his head snapped off. That's what they believed. But when Avram went, because they saw the event coming out of the kiln, this is sorcery, this hocus pocus. They're as adept in sorcery as Avram is. Avram, when he goes to war against the four mightiest kings, he will be killed. That was their intention. But they may have thought it's sorcery, or whatever they attributed, but Avram knew the real thing. He understood who his backer was. God saved him from the kiln. If God saves him from the kiln, Avram could take on the whole world single-handedly. Because if your backer is the Almighty, and there's nothing beyond the Almighty's ability, numbers mean nothing. Victories, other people's victories mean nothing. If you're acting on behalf of God, as God brought the great flood to destroy the world, Avram's acting as God's agent. He could vanquish all these four kings, and he did. He vanquished the four mightiest kings. And what was he declared as? The Seal King. He was the Prince of God. The world declared him as the king as the Prince of God. Coming out of the kiln, they weren't impressed. That could be attributed to witchcraft. But you know what they say? Might is right. But if you demonstrate that you have that power, that you could vanquish the four mightiest kings, you can only attribute it to one thing. It's called Elokim. He is the Prince of Elokim. Because anything less than that, there's no way he could succeed to that degree. But again, many people, they attribute many things to many things. And very often, when they don't have an answer, the question is such a difficult question, the question becomes an answer. The question becomes the answer. I'll give you an example. I used to interact for many years with Larry's old buddy, the professed atheist. And he says to me, when the first time I met him, he says, I met many rabbis. I could buy them a dime a dozen. Those were his words. You understand? I said, I want to explain something. I'm not going to mention his name. I said, you met a rabbi now. With all your money, you can't buy me. And I'm going to prove it to you. You can't buy me. With all your money, I will not take a dime from you. Ever. Okay? Every other week we used to meet. We used to spar. And he says, I have a question. and I don't have an answer. I said, because you have a question. That automatically means you don't have an answer. That means your question that takes on the position of what? Of credibility. You're a credible person. You don't have an answer. I give you 10 answers to that question, yes. Because you're ignorant and nobody could respond to your question. That becomes your perspective. And then I started to literally pick them clean, as they say. After I answered everything, you know what he says to me? What about the Holocaust? Yeah, I answered every question. I have locked into a corner. The moment you have a question which you can't answer, because only God knows the Holocaust, why he brought it about. We have trust in God. If he brought the Holocaust, like anybody dies, we say, Dino emes. He's the true judge. For whatever reason, God allowed the Holocaust to take place. Why? What exactly was the reason? Only God knows. But that's not a refutation on everything we discussed. When you feel that you're stuck, what about the Holocaust? That's the answer. That's a question. It's not an answer. But people, all they will have to do is they have to hide behind the question. And if you don't have the answer to that question, they shut you out. When Avram defeated the four mightiest kings, as they said, the proof's in the pudding. He is Nasi Elokim. He's the Prince of God. Because there's no way he could have accomplished what he did unless he had that kind of backer. Call it deity, call it what you want. Call it almighty. But factually, proof's in the pudding. The four kings who defeated the five. Now Avram goes as a single person, which is the handful of people against these four kings, and he's the victor. There's only one answer. His backer is a backer that power means nothing because nobody could stand up to his power. I always tell the story. I've told it in the past with the Chofetz Chaim. You know, Vilna was the capital of Lithuania. And Vilna was the stronghold of the Haskalah movement, the Enlightenment movement. Meaning they turned Judaism into a culture. And they did whatever they can to dismantle traditional Judaism. And they made a mockery out of it. And it was Purim city. Of course, it's a cultural holiday. Purim, commemorating, they wanted to annihilate us. And there was a miracle. It has nothing to do with God. It's cultural. We celebrate Purim. So they had in the Jewish theater in Vilna, they put on a play. It was called, the play was the Armageddon. What's going to happen at the end of time? The place was packed to the rafters with all these enlightened people, all these heretics. And what's the play? Armageddon is millions of troops are coming to attack the Jewish people. And you have three old feeble rabbis. The Chofetz Chaim, somebody's depicting Chofetz Chaim, Rav Chaim Ozer Grzinski, who was the greatest Torah sage in the world, and Reb Shimon Shkop, who is known to be head one of the most advanced yeshivas in Europe. And they're aged people. And the three of them are holding an 18th century musket, like the Pilgrims had. They used to hunt turkeys with those kinds of muskets. No, the mouth opened wide, and the three of them are holding this heavy old musket, and they barely can hold it. And all three of them, they put their finger on the trigger because each one individually is not strong enough to pull the trigger of this musket. And they aim this musket at these millions of hordes coming to destroy the Jewish people. And they don't know if they're going to live or die. So they have to say a blessing. The blessing is, you've commanded us to sanctify your name. So they close their eyes. They have to say the bracha with kavanah, with focus and intent. And here they're swaying with this heavy musket. And they pull the trigger. and a little ball rolls out of the mouth of the musket, hits the ground, and as it hits the ground, the millions of hordes of enemy, they all drop dead. The place is laughing. The windows are shaking. There hasn't been a Purim like that in the history of the Enlightenment movement. Yeah. There was a Shiva student who stole himself into the theater, and he watches this. He's livid. He's upset. They just disgraced the three holiest rabbis. They made a mockery out of them. What does he do? Takes a beeline straight to Rodden. They report this to the Chofetz Chaim. And he says to the Chofetz Chaim, he says he's very upset. Tell me what happened. And he gives him a blow by blow review of this play. So he says to him, so why are you upset? He says, because they disgraced you. He said, why did they disgrace us? Because they depicted you with this musket and you pull it and the ball hits the ground and they all drop it. He says, why? But that's what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen. When it's meant to happen, that's what's going to happen. That one action will activate forces that will be destroyed. Like Avram, when he went to war, it says he picked up straw, threw it at them, it turned into spears. Everything he did was with a nuance of motion. He toppled all four of the mightiest kings. That's what's going to happen with the Armageddon. So what are you upset about? That's what he said to the student. When you have the tradition and you have what we call the Masorah, and the Novi, the prophet says, when the Armageddon is going to take place, as they step on Israel's soil, the flesh is just going to come off their bodies. Their eyes are going to totally melt in their sockets, and they're just going to die, every one of them. That's our Masorah. That's what the prophets say. That's going to be at the end of time. What's there to fear? There's nothing to fear. They believe they're going to vanquish us and destroy us. God says differently. I'm with you. I'm behind you. I back you. I protect you.